Hey everyone, welcome to Christ Culture and Coffee. We hope that you are doing well. Thanks so much for joining us again this week. And I have to say, I've been looking at some of our analytics, and there are a lot of people from out of the country weekly that listen to the show.
That's true.
So shout out for people that are not in America who are checking us out, and we're thankful that this is helping you. There was one guy, he might be in America, but I saw on our YouTube channel, he said that he goes out and street preaches and that he uses our videos to help him prepare.
Our videos?
That's what he said.
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting. So yeah,
wow,
cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so hopefully we're making an impact. Hopefully, definitely some of you can use this material we're going to share today about Buddhism, which will be really interesting and different. But before we get into talking about the Lucky Buddha.
The Lucky Buddha.
Yeah. That's a restaurant down the street from here.
That's a local thing for us. Like most of you probably don't get that. It's a Chinese restaurant.
It's a Chinese restaurant that's close by. It's really good, actually.
Yeah.
But before we get into talking about the original Lucky Buddha. There we go. We want to start with a coffee tip because we always like to start the show with Christ, culture, and coffee being a coffee tip. So Tyler, what is the coffee tip for today?
Yeah, this is going to be interesting for you guys. It's a little myth buster of a coffee tip here. A lot of people, I've heard this a lot growing up until I started doing this podcast and people enlightened me, just like the Buddha was enlightened.
Just like it.
Yeah, which we'll get into that more, that nice little pun I threw in there.
That was good. I like that.
But the thing is apparently it's been this running catchphrase or this idea or old wives' tale, some may say, that coffee can stunt a child's growth if you give it to them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, some people, I've heard that before. Yeah. Like, don't give kids coffee because it'll make them not grow. And then they also threaten kids with, like, hey, if you don't eat your vegetables, you won't grow, right? So one stunts it, and I guess one increases it. Yeah, whatever.
Exactly. So the thing is it's always kind of been on my mind, too. It's like, does coffee actually stunt a kid's growth? I was told that as a kid, too, when I asked them, like, hey, can I have some coffee for my parents? And they're like, nah, it's not good for you for, like, all these reasons.
But we care about your verticality.
I think the real reason is parents just don't want their kids to have caffeine.
All hopped up, sure. Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, so the thing is, what's very interesting about that is there's actually no evidence that coffee or caffeine in general stunts a kid's growth.
Amen to that.
Isn't that interesting?
Amen to that.
Amen to that, right. Some believe this myth actually developed from a study that was done in the 80s that showed people who regularly drink coffee had an increased risk of, I might butcher this, osteoporosis. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, bone disease.
Yeah, exactly. Because caffeine can lead to increased calcium excretion in the bones. So people were convinced that essentially the idea that it would weaken your bones and cause a child's growth to be stunted, right?
Okay, because if you weaken bones, then maybe it won't help bones develop right.
Exactly, yeah. So that would make you smaller. So you know what, like, I can see where their line of thinking was, but there is no scientific basis in that.
No, there isn't.
It doesn't happen at all. And like, crazy thing is we've talked about it many times on the show. Coffee turns out to actually be really healthy before you add all the cream, sugar, and everything else that goes in there.
Sure.
So, but coffee in itself tends to have a lot more health benefits than it does on the negative aspects for your health.
It does.
So very, very thankful for that. But another reason people have believed this is also because of the suggestion for pregnant mothers to limit their caffeine intake.
Yeah, doctors always say
exactly.
that. Yeah,
so that is one aspect where it's not good for your health is when you're pregnant.
Yeah.
So that's kind of maybe like the idea they think, maybe it stunts the development of like preborn children too, and as well as born children. So you can see where this mentality was coming from.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when it comes to anything like this, moderation is the key to it all, right?
Exactly.
Like, again, you probably shouldn't give your kid a venti, double espresso shot, whatever, of all this caffeine because their body's little and it can't handle that. It'd be like you drinking 3 of them. Not a good idea, right? But kids can handle caffeine.
Exactly.
And it's not horrible for them at all in small doses. Actually, sugar's probably way worse
for
kids than caffeine is.
Yeah, and it's always about, like you said, it's moderation with anything, not even just coffee. Like, it's whenever we try to overindulge of something in excess, that's when it becomes an issue.
It's never good,
No, of course.
It's so funny because my kids love coffee.
Oh, that's great.
Well, they love sugar. Yeah, and so that's the real key. But they get up somewhere and she's like, Dad, can we have kid coffee? And what they mean is, so I make this coffee for them where I get these small cups that we have for them. and then I put like a tablespoon of sugar in it. It's
That's
probably
funny.
not good for them. And then I put like this much coffee and I stir it around to melt the sugar, and then I fill it up with milk. And they love it because it's basically sugar milk
That's so good.
that has a little hinge of brown.
Have you ever had them
coffee
taste
color.
black coffee?
Oh yeah, they don't like it.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
great.
They don't
That's
like
like
it at all.
I picture that the equivalent of like when you give a baby a lemon and they suck on it.
Yep. Yeah, they are not a fan of black coffee, but they like kids' coffee, and so every
That's
once
great.
in a while we'll let them have that because moderation is the key. And so
That's good.
Yep. So if you got kids out there and you want to get them hooked on caffeine, you can do that right now, and it won't damage their height. So
That's
don't worry
great.
about that at all. They will still probably be the same height that they would have been, and if they aren't, you will never know.
That's true. Yeah,
It is true.
So, on with the topic for today.
Yes, Buddhism.
Yes,
And
we-
you wanted to talk about this, Tyler. Why did you think this would be kind of a cool subject to get into?
Yeah. Well, it came to my mind when we were thinking of something to talk about and discuss next on the podcast. Is we've been going over a lot of stuff with progressive Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
That was our last series, right? We were talking about New Age. We were talking about the Enneagram, and then Marsha's testimony and coming out of that. So. What's interesting is you could see throughout a lot of the themes that we find in the progressive church, especially, just like we were discussing over the past series, that people tend to take these ideas out of other religions. And oftentimes, a lot of those people in the progressive church adapt some ideas that are originally founded in Buddhism.
Yeah, a lot of New Age stuff is New Age ideologies.
New
a
Age
lot
specifically,
of it is,
yeah.
Hinduistic and Buddhistic, but it's not like pure Hinduism or Buddhism. They like take and mix and match stuff.
And we realize, like I was thinking about this, we haven't discussed Buddhism really at all that much on the podcast. So to give you guys some context to understand a little bit more deeply the philosophy behind the way of thinking of some of the New Age ideas that are out there, we wanted to cover Buddhism. That way you could just get a good ground level foundation for where some of these mystic and spiritual ideas are coming from.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea. I'm excited about this. So let's get on with it. I'm going to talk about the origins of Buddhism. Where did this come from? Now, there is some debate onto the dates for the life of who we know as the Buddha. His actual name, though, was Siddhartha Gautama. And the general consensus is he lived in the 6th and 5th century BC. So there's differing dates depending on which scholars you read. But a general consensus that's pretty close is somewhere between 563 to 563 to 483.
Yeah,
is when he lived his life. And so this, according to biblical date, and biblical timeline, this would be right near the end of the prophet's writing. So in Malachi's time period. Or later is when Buddha lived. Now, his name, again, was Siddhartha Gautama, and he was actually born in Nepal. A lot of people think he's from India. And again, the culture is very similar, but he's not from India. He's from Nepal.
I mean, you'd see why people would think that because these ideas are very popular in India.
Yep. He was also born into a regal class, the warrior class. So his family was wealthy and lived in a palace and had money and had everything they'd ever want. But he eventually left everything that he had, all of his wealth and his status and his position in life, to find the source of suffering and how to eliminate it. That was like his goal in life. How do I find the source of suffering and stop it? So he practiced what's called asceticism, which is extreme, fasting and not drinking a lot of water and all these kinds of things in order to try to be able to meditate better and things like that. But there's so much somewhat myth around this and differing stories on what the actual thing that happened was. But one of the general stories about what happened to him is this. It talks about how when he was born, there was an astrologer that came to his father's palace, and the astrologer claimed to see certain markings on the baby and said that he is either going to be a phenomenal monarch or he's going to be a great ascetic, wise man, enlightened one. And obviously his dad wants him to be a ruler.
Well, of course,
right?
yeah.
So that's what he wanted to go into. But this sage, this astrologer told him this, and this kind of set his destiny for his life. So his dad tried to keep him inside the temple because the advisor said if he goes outside and he sees the suffering and the poor and those that are hurting, he's going to want to become an enlightened sage. So his dad tried to hide him in the temple. So life was cushy, life was easy, it was good. His dad kept him there to become this great warrior and monarch. However, Siddhartha eventually gets out when he's a young adult, and he sees what the outside world is like, and he sees people that are starving, and he sees the homeless, and he sees people with diseases.
Yeah.
And this really had a huge effect on him. So he comes back to the palace. He's trying to make sense of how does life work. He eventually gets married to this lady. They have a son. But by the time he's 29 years old, he decides he's going to leave his family to become an enlightened one who figures out how to eliminate people suffering. He wanted to cure suffering. And so it's interesting from a Christian perspective because he abandoned his family. So he brings suffering into their life in order to go alleviate and cure suffering.
Yeah, that's very fascinating. It's you can already see off the bat where we're getting here. It's like already there's a misconception of truth.
Yep.
In the founding of how he went out to seek this.
There is.
Yeah.
And so he goes about and he lives an ascetic lifestyle. He fasts, and he was trying to fast as much as he could. There's actually a story about him where he was trying to cross a river, a small stream kind of thing, and he was so weak from not eating that it almost washed him away and drowned him. And
that doesn't surprise me.
And after that, he decided, hey, I probably need to eat a little bit more.
It's probably true that happened.
And so he's going around doing this. He's exchanging ideas with people. He's obviously meditating. He's practicing yoga. He's doing asceticism. And after 5 years, he has this experience where he sits under the bo tree and he has a enlightenment where he becomes what they say is the Buddha. So he gains this insight, which we're going to get to. One of the insights he gained during his enlightened state was called the Four Noble Truths. But that's why he's called Buddha. A Buddha is a Sanskrit language. It's a Sanskrit word that means the enlightened one. Mm-hmm. And so when you say the word Buddha, that's what it means, enlightened one.
Yeah.
So he became the enlightened one, and he began teaching this middle way, is what it's called, to a whole bunch of followers, and then they've passed it on through the centuries.
Yeah.
And then we have it still existing to this day.
Yeah, and that kind of segues into what the main Buddhist holy books are.
Yes, absolutely. We want to talk about what are the holy books of Buddha?
Yeah,
Buddhism.
exactly. And so the interesting thing about Buddhism is a lot of people confuse it for Hinduism. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because the holy books in Buddhism are a lot more defined, whereas you find in Hinduism, there's not really a defined sacred text.
No.
But with Buddhism, there is.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make that distinction for you guys. So in Buddhism, there is called, I believe it's called the Tripitaka, is what it is. And it means three baskets, essentially. So these three different aspects, or baskets, as they say, for what entails Buddhist teaching. Mm-hmm. So the first of the three are Buddha's sermons. He left these sermons when he was enlightened and trying to help others to become enlightened as well. So Buddhists will often look at his sermons for teaching and guidance. Mm-hmm. And then there's also the rules for monks. That's the second of the three baskets, where they follow these strict ways of life in order to become enlightened. And
you've seen, I'm sure many of you have seen Buddhist monks, right? They typically wear orange, they have shaved heads, robes. Buddhist monks.
That's kind of what a lot of people think of, aside from the Catholic monk. That's what you think of if you're thinking of Eastern monks. That's typically what it is.
Buddhist,
yeah, Buddhist. And then lastly, for the third of the three baskets are the philosophical teachings, which is typically passed on by word of mouth, where it's just taught the philosophy and the way of life to live out the enlightened lifestyle to become enlightened. Mm-hmm. So those are the three baskets. And what's interesting, though, All of those things combined with with Buddha's sermons, the rules for monks, all in the philosophical teachings, all the writings that they have in Buddhism is actually 70 times larger than the entire Bible, Old and New Testament.
That's insane.
So picture that, 70 Bibles. That's how much text that is there.
So if you're a Buddhist, we do this thing in Christianity a lot of times called reading through the Bible in a year.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
I wonder, could you imagine trying to read through the Tripitaka in 1 year?
That's probably,
70 times larger than the Bible.
That's the thing, and that's why you got to think
so big.
That's why the monks dedicate their lives to this.
You have to.
You got it. Yeah,
you have to dedicate your life to studying it.
Exactly. To truly understand everything, you have to spend your whole life doing this. Because we have such a hard time, Christians, completely understanding the Bible after even reading it in a year, right?
Yep.
And there's so much studying just in 1 year. Imagine doing that 70 times that amount of text.
Trying to understand, to comprehend, and to live by and to remember.
Yeah, of course.
It'd be very difficult.
Just kind of give you a picture of what it's like.
Yeah, there's dedication for sure. Now let's get into some of their beliefs, all right? So what are the teachings? What were the ideologies and the philosophies of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha? So he begins to preach this thing called the middle way. Now, I do want to emphasize there's different forms, different types of Buddhists. Just like in Hinduism, there's a lot of different views on things.
Yeah.
In Buddhism, it's not, they say the big word is it's not monolithic. It's not like one thing. Whereas Christianity is pretty much, it's one thing. To be a Christian means these basic doctrines.
Yes.
Right? In Buddhism, there's a couple of different ideas, so many different beliefs. Now, all of them, of course, will claim that they're following the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama. That's why they call themselves Buddhist, right? But there's two main branches of Buddhism currently. One of them is called the Mahayana Buddhists, which Mahayana means the greater vehicle. And then there's also the Hinayana, which means the lesser vehicle. So what the Mahayana teach, the greater vehicle, they teach, and this is a really important thing, they claim that enlightenment is available to all people. That anybody can actually become enlightened.
Yeah, they do.
Okay? The Hinayana, the lesser vehicle, they believe that only a few of the committed, real serious about Buddhism people can become enlightened. So that's the main distinction. They believe everyone can do it in one group, the Mahayana, and then the Hinayana believe that it's only a select few who really put forth an extreme amount of effort.
Yeah.
Now, the Hinayana Buddhists understood calling it the lesser vehicle, right? Mm-hmm. It kind of gave it like a bad connotation.
That's kind of what you think. It's
lesser, you don't believe everyone can do it. It's not good PR. And so instead of calling themselves the Hinayana, they renamed themselves, they rebranded, and they call themselves the Theravada Buddhists. So Theravada Buddhism, Theravada means the teaching of the elders. So instead of saying the lesser vehicle, only a few can be enlightened, they didn't want to lead with that foot.
Yeah.
So they renamed themselves. So if you hear of Theravada Buddhists, they believe that it's only the extremely committed few who actually can become enlightened, and most everybody else won't. But the Mahayana Buddhists believe everyone can.
Yeah, they had a good rebrand there.
Yeah, it is a good rebrand. Yep. But if you hear those terms, that's the distinction. That's what it is. So now, basic beliefs in Buddhism. Both groups of Buddhists accept the Four Noble Truths.
That's right.
And they accept the Eightfold Path. And so let's get into what are the Four Noble Truths?
Yeah, the Four Noble Truths, first off, is, for the first one, it's life consists of suffering, pain, misery, sorrow, and unfulfillment.
Okay, time out right there. I would agree with that.
I would too. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
So I think it's a matter of what happened earlier. He recognizes that the world is broken, right?
Yes.
That's what happens. So that's one of the first truths.
Yeah, he saw suffering.
Exactly.
Sounds bad. So we would agree with that. Yeah, pain, misery,
of course,
sorrow,
there's sin,
there's suffering.
There's wickedness in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, there is suffering in this world for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the second noble truth?
Yeah, the second noble truth is that everything is impermanent and ever changing. We suffer because we desire those things which are impermanent. So we have desire for things that are temporary.
Okay.
Essentially.
Now,
and it causes suffering.
I would agree. Okay. So let's take a step back.
Sure.
Everything is impermanent. Disagree.
I disagree with that as well.
Because we would say, no, there is a God who is perfect and immutable. He can't change, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't change.
However, I will agree with the next part of that portion where it says that we suffer because we desire things that are not important that are impermanent to a degree. Yeah.
Well, now here's the thing. This is interesting to think about because I would agree with that in a sense.
That's why. Yeah.
We suffer when we indulge wrong desires.
Yes. Right?
Wouldn't that be a Christian perspective? Probably?
Yeah, to kind of paint a picture of this. Remember how earlier we were talking about kids and coffee in moderation? It would cause children probably suffering at a young age to get addicted to coffee if they overindulged on it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So in the same way, when it comes to that's kind of a little picture of what this is. But just to give you an idea, so when we focus too much and overindulge, that is what causes suffering on temporary things.
I would say overindulgence is a sin, but I would also say if we indulge any desire, that is a sin. So it's not if I overindulge lust.
That's a great way of saying it.
No, it's just indulging lust, right?
Of course.
Not
You're absolutely
overindulging
right.
murder. It's just indulging murder, right? Or hatred.
Of course.
Yeah,
of course.
that definitely brings suffering. There's consequences to sinful actions. Well, and the Bible says this, right? That the wages of sin is death. But also when desire conceives, James said, it gives birth to sin. And when sin fully grows, it brings death.
So there we go.
And so, there's consequence to indulging bad desires.
Exactly. So, but you see
but that's
the
not
issues,
what
though,
he's
with
saying,
it.
though.
Exactly, yeah.
He says everything's impermanent and ever-changing. Disagree. And then he says, we suffer because we desire things which are impermanent. I desire some things that are impermanent and I don't suffer for it. Like food is impermanent.
That's true, yeah.
So again, it's interesting, right? So I do agree we can bring suffering onto ourselves.
Yeah, but majority of what that statement is saying is not true. And the funny thing is, and I know we're kind of dragging this one noble truth out a lot.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is it's also a self-defeating statement because it says everything is impermanent and ever-changing.
So is that,
That would mean that statement is impermanent and ever-changing.
Yeah, that's true.
Meaning it's going to change, meaning, so are things actually permanent?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see there's
one
so
of the
many
four
issues.
noble truths, right? One of the four pillars of what we believe.
Are the four pillars then permanent?
Impermanent?
That's the thing. To them, they're not. So,
Anyway.
All
right, what's the third one?
The third noble truth. The way to liberate oneself from suffering is to eliminate all desire. We must stop craving that which is impermanent. Now, 100% disagree with that.
Yeah. I would say our desires can lead us to sin and then bring on bad consequences. We can make ourselves, we can hurt ourselves, right?
Yeah,
we can bring
of course.
suffering on ourselves. But the way to stop that isn't to eliminate all desire.
Right.
It's to eliminate wrong actions.
Yeah, and
I wouldn't even say it's to eliminate wrong desire, because Jesus was tempted, but he didn't sin.
He was,
right? And so I can be tempted and not sin. So it's more like eliminating giving into wrong desires.
Well, it's another self-defeating thing here. It's actually impossible to eliminate desire.
Yeah.
Impossible philosophically. And what I mean by that is because in order to eliminate desire, it is a desire in itself to eliminate desire.
Yeah.
Therefore, you were always desiring something.
Yep.
Always.
That's right.
So to say that you need to eliminate desire, it just philosophically doesn't make sense.
It doesn't
It's
work.
impossible.
Yeah, it's a self-defeating idea. That's true. All right, so what's the fourth noble truth?
Yes, the fourth noble truth is desire can be eliminated by following the Eightfold Path, which again, that segues into the Eightfold Path,
yeah.
right?
So if this is how you do this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was the Four Noble Truths. Now the Eightfold Path, we're getting into that. Section 1 is wisdom. Pana is what they call it. It is right understanding is the idea. Seeing the world as it is, seeing that it is an illusion and not clinging to the impermanent.
Well, that makes sense because if everything's impermanent, you're desiring impermanent,
Yeah.
you got to view things as impermanent and illusion.
Right.
And this is like a Hinduistic idea too. They don't believe that reality is there.
Yeah.
They think it's an illusion.
And so this goes hand in hand with the Four Noble Truths. So you see why they say, well, you have to believe this in order to believe in that, because they go hand in hand.
Okay, so the first of the Eightfold Path, number 1, right understanding, seeing the world as an illusion and not clinging to the impermanent.
Correct.
Okay.
And then also with that, we have right thought. That's the second part to section 1. It's that paying attention to what our intentions are with others and with our actions. Like, do intentions stem from anger, greed, jealousy, lust? And if so, we are more likely to harm others. So that kind of all encompasses the idea of what they think of the first section.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so right understanding, right thought, and I'd agree with that somewhat, right? Paying attention to what our intentions are with others and where our actions stem from. Is it greed? Is it anger? It's funny, though, because like a lot of these are like almost saying like your decisions or your intentions and your interactions with others are stemming from emotions.
Yeah.
But you have a will.
Exactly.
And you can decide to tell those, hey, stop.
Yeah, that's so true.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So, and then with that, just moving on to the next part, they break it up into 3 sections. So section 2 is ethical conduct. So the next one is right speech, using your words to love others and build them up. Not using speech, including written words, to cause suffering. Intentions come into play with all of this.
Okay.
Because obviously, when they say intentions come into play, they know that obviously as human beings, we can make mistakes to use speech in a way that unintentionally can harm others. So that's what they mean by that.
That makes sense.
So in their worldview, it's that if you are saying something unintentionally that causes harm and suffering, you can't be held responsible for it necessarily.
Yeah, and in addition to that, they would also say that you can be saying nice words, but if your intentions are to get something selfishly from the other person, then you're indulging in a desire in the impermanent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it goes both ways.
So to them, it's all about the intent. Yep. That's the focus on there.
Yeah, and are you clinging to what's impermanent? Yeah, in your speech.
Yes.
Yep.
And then right action, to pay attention to how you act in the world. Actions should go towards helping but not harming. Also, doing things to your best with skill is important. Action should not cause suffering to others. So you can kind of see a common theme here.
Yeah.
The whole idea is eliminate suffering, don't cause harm to others.
Yep.
That's what they're getting at.
That's the ethical play out of this.
Exactly.
Yeah, 'cause you're trying to eliminate suffering. Yep.
And then right livelihood is the next one.
Okay.
Where you work is important. Does your occupation cause suffering or help? Even if you are working in a company that helps others, are you treating your coworkers well?
So this is interesting. So now you get into a vocation. So I don't know if Buddhists would be really okay with working like at a tobacco factory.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think you would, no.
Things like that would be kind of unethical in this worldview.
It's true.
But working in healthcare or massage or those kinds of things are helping people.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
You'd have to take that into account as a Buddhist. Like, what's my livelihood?
Yeah.
And am I hurting or helping?
So because by working for those companies, you're enabling harm and suffering in the world.
Yeah, and you're helping produce a product that can cause suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they wouldn't be about that.
Yeah, that's true. And then, so then that leads us into section 3, mental disciplines, okay?
Okay.
So the first one in this section is right effort.
Effort.
Yeah, exactly. Right effort. Being aware of where you are, putting forth effort in your speech, actions, and if you were putting forth effort to meditate and follow the Eightfold Path, or if you are putting forth effort towards frivolous things.
Okay.
So making sure that your motivations are there is another way of putting it.
Again, though, this begs the question, like, is the Eightfold Path a permanent thing? Because I thought everything was impermanent.
That's
so what's the difference between putting my efforts towards a frivolous thing like, Nintendo, or putting it towards having, right livelihood?
Yeah, and if everything
What's
is
the difference
impermanent
if everything's impermanent?
Yeah, and another way to attack that idea of with everything being impermanent, then that would imply that the lifestyle that Buddha taught of eliminating suffering is also impermanent.
Yeah.
So
why is that?
Why do we need to go? Yeah. Why is that goal permanent?
It has to be a permanent goal in order for it to be important for all people to follow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you see, that's a problem. We're just touching the surface of all this, and you can already see all the philosophical issues.
Yeah.
Like, we're not even fully talking about from a Christian perspective yet. This is just philosophical problems with Buddhism. And then again, that brings us into the next part. It's right awareness. Okay. being mindful of your present, not going throughout your day living inside your head or dwelling on the past, but being aware of the present situations and not allowing them to be made worse.
Okay.
So focus on the present. Focus on present
Don't think
suffering.
of what could be's or what ifs.
Yeah.
That's kind of the idea.
Exactly. Don't dwell in the past.
Okay.
Then the last one of the 8 here is right meditation. So focusing the mind solely on one object. Right meditation requires the use of right effort, right intention, and right awareness.
Okay. Tyler, so how do I focus my mind on only one object when it also entails 3 things?
That's the question, Robbie.
How do you do that, right? Yeah.
Well,
that's really
that's the thing.
interesting.
Yeah, you have to see the universe as an impermanent illusion throughout this philosophy.
That's what it's based on, because it's based on a Hinduistic worldview. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
So the universe is an impermanent illusion, and then the sad part is you also have to view yourself as part of that illusion.
You have to.
So I don't exist. I have to get out of that idea. I have to be enlightened past my own existence.
Yeah. Which is strange, because this doesn't sound like very attractive or appealing.
Eliminating suffering sounds attractive and appealing. And not bringing suffering into your life or others sounds appealing.
But the ultimate goal...
Well, getting to Nirvana, we'll get to that.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't sound appealing. But so how does this play out? Well, in Buddhist life, with ethical conduct, they are very against taking the form of any life.
Yeah.
Not just human, but any life, right? Because you don't want to cause suffering. And so they don't want to take any life. They're very careful about not stepping on bugs. I mean, for real, like all of that kind of stuff. Not taking a life. Stealing, obviously, they think is terrible because you're enacting suffering on somebody by taking their things. And you're giving into impermanent stuff. You're going to hurt and cause suffering in order to have some impermanent stuff. Immoral sexual behavior, they would say, is wrong because that comes from a desire, and that leads to a whole bunch of types of suffering in certain people and jealousies and issues in relationships. They would say lying is wrong because you are trying to deceive in order to get something because you're desiring the impermanent. But they also believe taking intoxicants is a bad idea.
That's very interesting.
Taking intoxicants, because it's giving into an impermanent hallucinogen or alcohol or whatever in order to feel a certain way, right? So it's interesting. They throw that in there too, So the idea is that as you have, like they said, right awareness, right meditation, you can eventually attain enlightenment. And Buddha wanted to attain freedom from suffering, but also the freedom from the cycle of death and rebirth, because Buddhists do believe in reincarnation, because that's a hangover from Hinduism. It stayed because Buddha came out of a Hinduistic worldview. And so he also wanted to think, so not just how do I alleviate suffering in this life and not cause suffering for others, but how can I ultimately alleviate suffering? Because if I keep coming back in a different life form, I'm going to keep experiencing suffering.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
how do I completely get out of it? And he realized you have to get out of the cycle of reincarnation and karmic debt.
Yes.
And so the way to escape this, he says, is to ultimately, truly cease craving the impermanent, which includes the idea of yourself, which includes that this material world, this coffee cup, this phone, Tyler, that any of this even exists. I have to realize this is impermanent and illusion. Stop desiring it and realize I'm not even actual. The self, me, doesn't exist. And when I do that, I can attain enlightenment.
Yeah, it's very fascinating, this whole thing, because you see that it's kind of like all the ideas that they implement in Buddhism are to get out of this world, right? It's
Yep.
counter to the Hinduistic idea of reincarnation. They like Buddhism.
They don't think it's cool.
They don't.
Yeah.
They actually, if I'm not mistaken, they do actually believe that reincarnation is real. Is that correct? Yeah.
They think it happens. They're trying to get out of it.
Exactly, yeah. And they're trying to get out because they think it's bad. Whereas in Hinduism, they think it's good because it's a cycle of living, right?
Yeah, they don't really have a story for what happens. But in America, we've taken reincarnation and we made it cool. Like, oh, my next life, I want to do this and do that. And it's like, that isn't the idea at all. The idea is you have to keep coming back because you didn't do good enough.
Yeah.
And you're going to suffer more. And so they're trying to get out of it. We hijacked that idea.
Exactly.
And think it's cool, you know?
Yeah. And so just to get to ultimate salvation, right? Like what is the end goal in Buddhism? The end goal is that at the moment you gain enlightenment, you have reached Nirvana. And now that's not to be confused with the band from the 90s.
No.
Okay? Yeah. Nirvana is essentially this, the way it's described by Buddha.
This is his description.
This is a quote from Buddha of what Nirvana is. He says, "There is a sphere which is neither earth nor water nor fire nor air, which is not the sphere of the infinity of space, nor the sphere of the infinity of consciousness, the sphere of nothingness, the sphere of perception or non-perception, which is neither this world, neither sun nor moon. I deny that it is coming or going, enduring death or birth. It is only the end of suffering." Now, what's interesting, he mainly, in order to describe this sphere, which he describes as nirvana, he has to describe what it isn't. Yeah. That's kind of what he's doing here. So really what it is we have to come to a place where we eliminate suffering and we come to a place in our minds where we develop peace and become enlightened through the process of meditation and over years of practicing to eliminate our desires.
And maybe lifetimes. Reincarnate.
Correct. Yeah. Until eventually we get it. And then we become one with nirvana.
Yep. It's not even nothingness, though. It's less than nothing.
Yeah.
Because he says it's not the sphere of nothingness.
The way he essentially is describing this here, it's that we are becoming abstract. We are ceasing to exist, but yet our essence is still going out into the nothingness. So like for some reason, like it gets a little confusing, because it is. But the idea is that our essence becomes nothingness.
Becomes one with the nothing.
Becomes one with the nothingness.
With the beyond nothing.
Yeah, which doesn't make sense because it's not real. But
you're not real.
Right. I have to eliminate that.
Yes.
Yeah, but see, since I don't understand that right now, it'll be a few lifetimes till maybe.
Yeah, and since you continue to cling to food and
so
to
exactly
these other things.
Yeah. So as Christians, we have to think through ideas like this. Now, it's not as common for us here in the U.S., these type of Eastern thoughts, right? I mean, there are Buddhists out here. There's lots of Buddhists out here.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah, but it's not as common as it is maybe in Europe or obviously in Asia.
Yeah, in India, Nepal.
Yeah, exactly.
There also is, and I just want to mention this, this is a different thing. We're not going to get into it.
Right, yeah.
But there's also Zen Buddhism, which is a little bit different because it is a Japanese version of Buddhism. Again, they hold to the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, but they have different nuances about things. That's a little different. And Zen Buddhism is very popular. I mean, it's not widely popular, right? But it is popular in America. A lot of
Zen Buddhism was kind of mixed. Buddhism mixed with ancestry and history and like cultural upbringing.
Well, I mean, that's like Shintoism's there, because like Shintoism's the ancestry stuff and the like pantheon stuff, but Zen Buddhism is like Taoism mixed with Buddhism.
Yes,
that's what it is.
Okay, yeah.
And when you see Tao written, it's written Tao.
Yeah, exactly. And now again, we're not going to get into that. We don't have time to break down
that's
everyone.
A whole different thing.
But there are different versions of Buddhism out there.
But this is the core.
Exactly.
This is the core of what it is.
These are the core ideas. Now, the thing is as Christians, we need to navigate through this still, because like I said, there still are people who believe in these ideas that we can interact with day to day, especially for some of our listeners who are in other countries. I'm sure you guys out there deal with it a lot more than we do here in Phoenix, Arizona. So it's something that's important that we need to be aware about. And in order to tackle this, we need to go through what Robbie and I like to do is to go through the 8 worldview questions. And now, if you're kind of confused on what those are, the 8 worldview questions, we've covered them on past podcasts. We did a series on them. You could go back and look those up. But if you also, we kind of get these ideas from James Sire's book, The Universe Next Door. They're also found in there. So I would highly recommend that. So, but we're not going to get into what the 8 worldview questions are for time's sake. But to kind of address Buddhism through the perspective
of the 7 basic questions.
Of the 7 questions, we're going to tackle that right now. So what is ultimate reality to Buddhism?
In Buddhism, so obviously to us it's God.
Right, but to us it's God,
In Buddhism, ultimate reality is the void. It's not even nothing. It's beyond nothing. It's not something you can name. It's not something you can grasp. So to say nothing is incorrect. And to say it's something is also incorrect. And that's kind of what Buddha was explaining with Nirvana. It's nothing. It's void. It's not a thing. It is the origin of all things, but it's void. It's not a mind. So it's not like a person. They don't believe that. It's just void. It's Nirvana.
And so that's kind of what they see as ultimate reality.
That's the ultimate. Well, and that's where they want to get to.
Right. And for us, that's God.
Absolutely.
And so that brings us to question 2. What is the nature of nature?
And in Christianity, we think God made everything.
Exactly.
Right? To them, what do they think, Tyler? What is the nature of this world? And
everything is an illusion. Impermanence,
it's
right?
Not real.
We just discussed that. Everything is impermanent, including the world we live in. Including ourselves.
It's an illusion. It's not real at all.
Yes, exactly.
Which that's fascinating. So then going on to question number 3, what is a human being, right? As Christians, we would believe we're made in God's image and likeness, and we are his representatives, and he gave us rulership and procreative abilities and a lot. And we're important to him. Okay, in Buddhism,
there's value.
What is a human being in Buddhism?
Well, a human being is not like the individual person is not a soul. Like we teach in Christianity, like we learn from Scripture. In Buddhism, there's no nameable nature at the core of every person. It's just you are nothing. Whereas in Christianity, we have a soul. That is our nature. That is human nature, right? That is who a human being is. And then existence factors in Buddhism are body, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. That's what they believe. It's
just there's not an I.
A machine.
And that's also why they think like those evil desires are controlling you.
It's just a part of this mechanism.
There's a me. If there's no me to be controlled, how is it controlling me?
It kind of fits into like this I don't know, secular worldview a little bit. And when it comes to this idea, because a lot of people who take a secular worldview would say, human being's essence is just body, feeling, perceptions, and mental formations. So that's kind of how Buddhists view the human body.
And you can kind of look at Buddhism as atheistic Hinduism.
That's actually a great way of putting it.
That's a lot of what it is.
I often too, like, you see in Christianity, right? We have there's all these different heretical ideas and beliefs, and like Mormonism, who they claim to be a sect of Christianity, but it's completely heretical.
It's not Christianity.
Yes, in the same way, Buddhism is that to Hinduism.
It's an offshoot that's not exactly the same. But they took some ideas. So like one of the ideas, so in Hinduism, reincarnation, it's literally you, like your soul, getting put in a new life form. Okay? Buddhists don't believe that happens. What they believe is that you are an aggregate of previous life forms. And that when you die, you disappear, and then you're reconstituted as another person from those five existence factors: perception, feeling, body, mental formations, and consciousness. So they say you're put together from that. You're reconstituted, and then there's this aggregate of life after life after life. But you kind of disappear from being you, because they don't
Exactly.
think that the personality or the individuality is a thing.
Yeah.
There isn't that.
You're absolutely right.
You're just part of the one.
Yeah, which that kind of touched on the next question, which was what happens to a person at death. So yeah, exactly. It's this cycle of reincarnation.
Yep.
Right?
Over and over and over again, unless you can become enlightened and get to be nothing.
Yes.
Which sounds much better from my standpoint, to continue to be something than to become nothing.
Yeah, well, I think though, really, realistically, if you boil it down, the philosophy of Buddhism, they believe that, like, putting it kind of in Christian terms, this life is their version of hell. Everything that's happening is awful
suffering.
because of the suffering.
Yeah.
The best way for them to get out of this is to just eliminate it all. Just get rid of it.
Yeah.
Annihilate ourselves by becoming enlightened and becoming one with the nothing.
Yeah, and basically not exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the case. So that's kind of like the philosophy when you really break it down.
Yep. And then when you get into how do you know these things, right? The craziest part of this is that they believe that to become one with Nirvana is to pass beyond knowledge, which you need to do because knowledge is an illusion.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, so how do you know knowledge is an illusion? Where'd you get that knowledge? Is that knowledge an illusion?
Yeah.
So should I believe you or not?
You have to pretend a lot in this. You have to pretend that this actually is a concrete idea. I mean, well, you have to believe it is.
Cutting its legs out
and
from
pretend
under
it's
it.
not. Yeah, that's the problem.
It's espousing knowledge and then telling you knowledge is an illusion you need to not believe in.
Yeah.
Well, which is it?
It just doesn't make sense. It's because it doesn't work. This worldview does not work with reality. And
It goes on to the same with right and wrong. Like, how do we know what's morally good or permissible?
And
And
that's
they
the
would
next question.
say, listen, it's all an illusion, right? And so to eventually reach nirvana is to pass beyond good and evil.
Yeah.
So everything's perfect all the time. It is how it is. You have a hang up with this whole good bad thing. And it's like, well, then how do you recognize what suffering is?
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
How is suffering something that's concrete and defined? Because to them it is.
I know.
They define it and they say that, look, it's undisputable that this is
And we got to
suffering.
eliminate it. But if there's not good or evil, then you can't claim, then suffering's an illusion.
They would say that
Right?
anything with desire causes suffering.
Yeah, but
So-
suffering itself is an illusion.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like that comes out of the worldview.
Exactly.
So again, it's just very
Yeah.
inconsistent within itself.
If everything's an illusion, then you should just do whatever you want.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so that brings us now into the final question. Question 7 is, what is the purpose of history?
Yep.
The purpose in Buddhism is to realize one's oneness and enter nirvana is to pass beyond time. Time is unreal.
Time's illusion,
And
right?
history is this long-lasting cycle of illusion.
Yep. Over and over, reincarnate. And there's not a purpose to it. That's the
not,
sad part,
yeah.
other than trying to get out of it.
Yes.
So it's like a cruel game that we're in that's fake, and we just need to get out. Not get out to get to something better.
Right.
That's more of a Christian idea to a heaven idea.
Exactly.
This is just get out of it to nothing.
Yeah, and so the key is here, what we need to be doing, if you come into conversation with a Buddhist or anyone who believes in this type of philosophy, ask them these worldview questions and keep asking them questions. Because when it comes to Eastern thinking and type of religions like Buddhism, the best way to apply apologetics to them is to get them to ask the questions. Because oftentimes, culturally, they don't think in that way. They don't think in philosophical ways in that essence. They think in the terms of the spiritual and how they feel about these things.
Yeah.
So if you can get them to think philosophically about what they believe, that is huge. And then you can go through and ask them these worldview questions. And then when you ask them like the question, what is ultimate reality? And they say the void. And it say, well, how do you know that? And then like break that down. Keep asking questions. How do you know that enlightenment is the way to nirvana?
Well,
and how do you know?
They also might not even know the answers to these. Because like so many Buddhists or people who say they're Buddhists that I meet, they talk about, I just love meditating because it just calms me. And then I say, well, calmness is an illusion.
Yeah.
Well, it just brings me inner peace. Well, peace is an illusion. Like, that's not the goal of this thing. They don't understand. It's almost like this is a self-help thing to make me have a better life.
Always focus on that too.
What the idea is at all.
Focus on that too. If they bring that up and say, well, it gives me peace. It gives me this. It helps me to eliminate suffering in the world. Tell them, say, we'll ask them, like, isn't all of that an illusion? Yeah. That's what Buddha taught.
Well, most of the time, I mean, again, for real Buddhists, they understand this.
Of course.
But a lot of people, New Age, who practice Buddhism, they're not doing this. They're doing hey, I like to meditate and cross my legs and put my hands out, and I like to chant, and I like to, they're not doing what it really is. They ripped off methods in order to have a better self-help lifestyle.
And it's also psychological, a lot of it too. I mean, like, in the same way of how Christians, like how we can take time to meditate and pray, right? They get the same physical, like psychological benefits too from that, physical and psychological.
It's
from
good
rest.
to slow down and think about things. But
exactly.
Buddhism teaches you don't think about things.
Exactly. So that's
it's
like
different
the whole
from
mess
Christianity.
Here.
Christianity is focus on truth.
Yes.
This is deny reality.
Yes, and so you see
even
the problem
that you
with
exist. Yeah, it's completely different, even though we use the same terms. But yeah, people can use sitting and being calm and quiet, and that it's therapeutic.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm saying. It's this whole idea is that there's just no meaning to any of it.
No,
and so
there's not.
If the key to applying apologetics to someone who follows this worldview is to ask those leading questions and to get them to think, help them to realize, hey, this doesn't make sense with reality.
And the other thing too that's important with Hindus or Buddhists that I always like to bring up, because they believe if you follow this, like this is a path, the Eightfold Path, right, is a method for you to save yourself. Now again, I don't even think what they're trying to get saved to is very worthy of me going there. I don't think it's desirable at all. It's not attractive to me. Nirvana sounds terrible. But they are trying to save themselves. It's a works-based philosophy.
It is.
And we should, as Christians, we have something to offer the Hindu or the Buddhist, and it's forgiveness. They don't have a concept of being forgiven. They have the concept of working off my karmic debt or meditating harder or pushing myself to become enlightened. It's all up to them. But this idea that you can be forgiven, they don't have that concept.
It's true.
And so that, as Christians, that's something I think we should lead with when we're talking about
you can
a difference.
be forgiven of your desires that cause suffering.
Yep, and you could be forgiven of your karmic debt. You can be forgiven of the things you've done in past lives. And not only can that happen, but you exist. That's why you can be forgiven, and you are important.
Yeah.
You're not nothing. You're something.
You have
you're an
value.
individual that has value, and there's nothing else like you in all of creation.
And there's something better eternally out there for you than being annihilated and being nothing, essentially.
Because you have not only significance in this life, but you have eternal purpose and significance in the next.
And see, from an outsider perspective, that just sounds so much better.
I think so.
It just does. And that's the thing. You have to come to terms with all of the bad ideas that go into Buddhism in order to believe in it, all the philosophical ideas. And then on top of that, you also have to buy into this idea that you are worthless and meaningless, where Christianity offers stability. It offers philosophical reason. It offers logic, consistency.
Well, and it's livable.
And it's livable.
Yeah, you can't, as a Buddhist, like you can't really believe this and live it.
Yeah.
It's unlivable to believe everything's an illusion, including yourself.
Exactly.
Because every day you wake up thinking. Right?
The way I like to say is Christianity welcomes hypocrites. That's the thing. Like it welcomes people who cannot live out, they can't walk the talk.
Yeah, because it's admitting I need help.
Yes.
But this is like denying the thing you believe every time you have a thought or every time you pull your hand away from a hot stove.
That's impossible to do that.
Because
you
it's
can't
all
live
fake.
that out.
You can't live it out. Yeah, it's impossible. So, Buddhism has never been attractive to me. Real Buddhism, right? Yeah. Now, the New Age, self-help, whatever, that's a different thing. But this has never been attractive because it's just so unlivable. And then, again, if you are, the lesser vehicle Buddhist, you don't even believe most people can do it.
Yeah, that's exactly true. So it's just, I hope that for you guys that you just see through this overview of Buddhism that it's sad. It's something that we should pray for people who are believing in this idea, because it's very degrading to their humanity and their personhood. And they are so Buddhists, people who believe in the idea of Buddhism are so much more valuable than what it teaches, and they are so much more loved, and they have worth and more of a purpose than what Buddhism offers. Yeah. So I hope that this podcast has been helpful to those of you listening, and that you can walk away from this having an understanding of some of the philosophical ideas that are out there, because like we said, like there's other versions of Buddhism out there. There's even just people out there, especially in the US, this is very common, people who don't actually believe in like the full real Buddhism.
They just say it.
Yeah, I mean, like once a couple years ago, I met a guy who said he believed in Buddhism, but then his version of Buddhism had a god that was kind of like the Force from Star Wars, and he actually described it that way.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so there's so many versions of this because it's so abstract, it's so subjective. So it's just sad, but we need to understand what the core ideas of it are, so that way we can address it in the culture.
Absolutely, yep. And that's what we want to do, is we want to be able to talk to people and be ready to give a defense about our hope, but it's also kind and loving to know what other people believe, so that you can have an intelligent conversation with them, and hopefully put a stone in their shoe, put something in their mind that they keep thinking about, going, yeah, that was a really good point, that was a really good question, how do I answer that? Because we actually do live in God's world, and we actually were made to desire an eternal life, and we actually were made to have purpose, and all people were. And so I think we can appeal to that part of humanity and help people wake up to the realization of Christianity being true. But hey, thanks so much for being with us today on Christ, Culture, and Coffee. We will be back next week with another episode to help equip you to be able to defend your faith and to also be confident in what you believe, so that you can know for sure that what you're believing in has good reasons and good evidence. But thanks for being with us today, Tyler. This was fun.
It's been great.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, we'll see everybody next week.
Thanks.